This week, Academic Life The Dark Side is on location at the online Educa conference in Berlin. In the next 35 minutes, we'll be talking to some groundbreaking academic researchers and thinkers, including a scholar who has uncovered a sinister plot by children to manipulate their grandfathers into showing their photographs during conference presentations. Also, an interview with the director of the One Film Part for Every Child project. We'll be analysing the Delphi-type research method in an exclusive interview with the Oracle of Delphi. And we'll have a special feature about strategies for survival in academic life. All of this material will be recorded, edited and distributed during the conference to demonstrate the speed and efficiency with which educational video can be produced. Grandchildren are regarded as lovable little people, but a new study reveals that they can have a sinister hold over their grandparents. Jon is with the Centre for Grandchildren's Studies. What prompted your study, Jon? Well, we've been noticing an increasing trend for academics to show pictures of their grandchildren in their conference presentations, often completely unrelated to their topics. Politicians have been doing this for years, haven't they? Absolutely, yes. Earlier studies showed that politicians believe they can win votes by showing photos suggesting that they're lovable grandparents. So, while campaigning, a politician will often show photos with his grandchildren all around him, and usually with the youngest one sitting on his knee. But does this actually win him votes? Sometimes, yes, but other times it can have a negative effect on the votes if, for example, the photo of the grandchildren clearly shows they don't like the grandfather. That's interesting. And your study suggests that academics are now doing this as well. Why is this? Yes, at first we thought that that's because academics are much like politicians, wanting to seem like good guys, warm and loving when they're not. But we also wondered if academics are using their grandchildren's photos in their conference presentations because they don't have much else to talk about. So, showing photos of their grandchildren is not just a way of suggesting they're nice people, but it can also be a cover for having no results or opinions. Definitely. And there's a more sinister side to it, because sometimes even academics with many good things to report will use up time showing pictures of their grandchildren at the expense of their academic content. So we wondered if the grandchildren are somehow forcing them to do this. In a way, hypnotizing their grandparents to show their photos in public. Yes. At first we doubted that, but we gave questionnaires to 1,500 grandfathers and we found that 71% of those who are academics aren't even aware they're doing this. And you followed that up with an interview of grandchildren, didn't you? That's right, Jon. Many of them clammed right up when they found that we were onto them. But we broke down a few of them and they all told us that their grandfathers have no time for them at home. So the children got together and worked out a way to make their grandfathers show them affection in public. Well, this is amazing. How did the children get organised? Well, masquerading as grandchildren, we gained access to the Grandkids Secret Society, which operates online completely without parental or grandparental knowledge. The site trains children not only to make their grandparents show their photos in public, but also how to manipulate them into giving the kids money, treats and so on. The children can even download special software to monitor their grandparents' online activities and to put a lock on websites that criticise grandchildren's rights. What first put you onto this? Well, it became obvious to us during the 2012 presidential election campaign between Obama and Romney. A poll of children predicted that Obama would win weeks before election day, and many of the sample included grandchildren. Obama even commented on this by saying how perceptive children are. How do grandchildren form their political opinions? Well, possibly on the basis of CGI or grandchildren's gut instinct, or perhaps something more sinister to do with the party politics of the GSS. The Grandchildren's Secret Society? Yes. Horrifying. But researching this interview, we noticed that you have a photo of your grandson on the homepage of your own website. Well, yeah, but that's different. That's there because he's a nice kid and I like showing him on my website. Well, Couldn't that be why other grandfathers show their grandsons' photos? Well, you're right, I'll take it off immediately. But let me illustrate the way that academic grandfathers show off their grandchildren's photos during TV interviews. This is one of my eldest grandson. I won't name him for reasons of his personal security, but he's a great kid. He's 8 now. We took this one of him at McDonald's recently. And that's the youngest pair, one boy, one girl. They're great too. Grandchildren have over their academic. The little girl, well, she was photogenic right from the moment she was born. I always carry this one with me. This is one of all of us together at my birthday last year. That was a very good day. I really enjoyed that. And I think we could... My next guest is Professor Frank Madrimonti of the University of Mid-California. First, your name, Madrimonti. That means mountain mother, doesn't it? And your name's had quite an impact on your work, hasn't it? Well, I had an excellent mother. There she is. I decided the best way to honour her memory would be to help all the other mothers to get their children film parts. And when you became director of the Children and Media Centre at the University of Mid-California, you launched the One Film Part project. Off-pick, one film part for every child. So what gave you that idea? I realised that too many acting roles were going to privileged kids rather than being shared around. And you realised that the one thing mothers will pay out money for is to see their children in film and TV parts. Well, let me stress first that no mother has to pay a cent to get her child on our books. A small donation may help to get the casting agents to take notice, but how much? $10 is nothing. And how many children are there in, for example, the USA? 76 million. And you don't stop at the USA, do you? No, we've got good contacts in Bollywood. How many children in India? 440 million. And new ones being born every minute. And they can all act, you know, so the possibilities are limitless. Well, that's been a criticism of the One Film Part project, that it's not true that all children can act. Some aren't good looking enough or can't memorise lines. Well, that's partly true, I suppose, but for those kids we have what we call the Little Stars in the Night programme, where we cast them in crowd scenes and low lighting. But even if every child could be cast in a part, how easy would it be for them to get another part? Sustainability is an issue we're working on. So, when a child fails to land a second part, it can leave him feeling like a failure for life. Oh, it's up to the family to handle that. It's not our responsibility. Well, let's take a look at the case of little Pedro. Ah, Pedro. He was one of our first success stories. But his story didn't end so well, did it? Through the One Film Part project, Pedro got a walk-on role in a Brazilian TV sitcom, earning just $100 for a year's work. That's a lot of money for a Brazilian family. But his father disappeared with the money, and then Pedro was thrown out of the village because they said he'd become big-headed and hadn't even brought them in any money. Where's Pedro now? We've got a team out looking for him. Let's look back at your predictions about the number of children who would land film parts. Our predictions have stood the test of time. When the One Film Part project began, you said that all the world's children would get film and TV roles. Now, you've since reduced that promise to just all the world's poor children. But they're the ones who need the most help. And 7 years after the project began, you claim that you've cast 2 million children in film and TV parts worldwide. Can you verify that? But there are 100 million poor children in the world. How do you justify these empty promises? It's not our fault if empty promises don't come true. Ah, so you are admitting that your promises are empty. Well, that's not what I said. And that they've been what you yourself have called conscious rhetoric. I had to do that to convince the casting agents to help us. What do you say to the government's decision to introduce legislation preventing projects from raising people's hopes with empty promises? Well, do you have a message for all the mothers who trusted you and who still believe their kids will become film stars? It's up to them and the children to work hard and to have the ambition, and with our help, their dreams will come true. Professor Madrimonti, thank you. Thank you. It's important to get the word out. The more we talk about it, the more people will believe it. social science methodology expert, technology forecaster, consultant to world leaders. I'm talking today to the Oracle of Delphi. But I'm puzzled. I thought the Oracle was an old woman and that the Delphic tradition died out years ago. You're partly right. The original oracles were old women, and in Delphi itself the tradition remained public until around 400 AD. We've kept it going since then as a franchise, giving military and economic advice to heads of state and so on. But we've kept that quiet for obvious security reasons. And as the current holder of the official Oracle title, you're particularly interested in the applications of the so-called Delphi-type method in educational research. Yes, we're particularly interested in online education because we see online prophecy as a major way of expanding our franchise. Yeah. Do you supervise the Delphi research method when it's used to predict today's new and emerging educational technologies? Not as yet, but we are monitoring it. We suspect that modern prophets are using the Delphi brand name for the sake of credibility, but that their use of the giveaway Delphi type term may suggest departures from our official methodology. How would you describe the traditional method? Well, in Delphi, the oracles first inhale ethylene gas from fissures in the ground, then they go into a trance and they babble a lot. Their utterances are then interpreted by high priests according to official policy, and the predictions are passed on to the client. Well, I'm happy to tell you that educational applications of the method have preserved that tradition. One well-known forecasting team collates examples of new and emerging media annually. These are then interpreted by an advisory board, including representatives of the hardware and software industries, and their official predictions are passed on to educators around the world. While that's reassuring, we're also concerned that modern Delphi-type conclusions may be more susceptible to criticism than our original prophecies. By the old method, you see, the predictions were worded in a vague, ambiguous way to prevent critics from clearly identifying when the prophecies failed. Well, that's the same today as well. The technology forecasting project I mentioned never discusses when its predictions fail. They say their focus is on the future, and not on the past. In the old days, if a client acted on an oracular prediction with disastrous results, the vagueness of its wording allowed us to blame the client for misinterpreting it. That still happens too. If a new and emerging technology fails after implementation, today's forecasters blame the lack of good software, infrastructure support and so on. But there is another concern. We hear that modern technology forecasting teams include dozens of high priests from around the world rather than having cohesive local teams. Well, you needn't worry about that. The selection of today's prophecy teams ensures that they have cohesive opinions, with most of the members coming from the same region, America usually. Good. So minority views on the panel of experts are marginalised. That's right. The Delphi-type method's consensus-building feature always ensures that extreme views and specialised knowledge are ignored. Is it true today that modern technology forecasters have copied our old stratagem of claiming that their predictions have worldwide validity and reliability? Yes. Well, one thing they should remember is that in the olden days, worldwide meant just the region around the Mediterranean. We've always ensured that our Delphic prophecies are more or less credible by focusing them exclusively on the region that the local advisors actually know about. Well, you're right. There is a concern today about the global validity of today's technology forecasts. One predominantly US team is suggesting that its conclusions about new and emerging media have worldwide relevance, but they ignore the powerful educational role played by traditional media such as video in countries like China and India, because Americans only see TV as an old educational medium that's failed. I have noticed that a lot of today's conference speakers are talking about educational video. Yes, and that places those US analysts in an embarrassing position, having ignored educational TV throughout the history of their prophecy reports. Well, thank you. In general, you have set my mind at rest about modern uses of the Delphi method. You and your colleagues in India can be very proud of the way modern forecasters are using your method. Why are you talking about India? Delphi's the capital of India. That's Delhi. Well, Holland then. That's Delft. I'm from Delphi in Greece. The Oracle of Delphi. Thank you for joining us. The social science literature is full of terms ending with ism, ISM, behaviorism, constructivism, cognitivism. I'm talking today to Jon, who's invented more words ending with ism than most people have had hot lunches. I'm an ismist, one of the best. How do you define ismism? Well, the Urban Dictionary has a good definition. Ismism is a condition commonly seen in academia where terms ending with ism are incessantly created for every concept. But that sounds quite negative. Do you mind being associated with that activity? Not at all. It gets your name out there, and that's what matters. When did you become an ismist? Quite early in my academic career. I realised that I'd published some good, solid research articles, but nobody was reading them. Then, one morning in the faculty coffee room, I saw one of my colleagues opening his mail and finding the latest edition of an education journal. He looked quickly down the index, but not at the actual articles. And a few minutes later, I heard him saying, "Have you read so-and-so's new analysis of profunditism? It's quite interesting." Brilliant. Yeah, it was like name-dropping, only with an official-sounding word instead of someone's name. At that moment, I realised that inventing isms was an excellent way to get yourself quoted, rather than doing actual scholarly research. That moment was like an epiphany for me. In fact, I invented a term to describe it. Let me guess, epiphanism. You're right. Just make sure you quote me when you use that, because I coined it first. So, that was your first ism. Oh, yes, it's not the best ism I ever came up with, but it got me a couple of keynote invitations, so I was encouraged. And then you started making up terms ending with ism for just about everything. How many have you coined so far? 142. I'm impressed that you can think of so many. Well, many of them aren't actually original. If you look in Google when you come up with a new ism, you'll usually find that someone else has invented it already. Epiphanism's an example of that. But they've not usually applied their ism in your field. In my case, that's education. So then you refer to educational epiphanism without referring to the person who originally coined the ism. Yes, no need for that. No one ever suspects that someone else has already thought of it because, like my colleague in the coffee room, they don't read the literature anyway. So how does ismism work? How do you come up with the terms? Give me a test. Well, what about a new term for working together? Not cooperativism or collectivism or connectivism, because those have already been used. Well, it's to do with working in a group. So first you think of all the synonyms for that. Yes, I've got it. Collaborativism. Amazing. That took less than 10 seconds. So next, when someone asks you what collaborativism is all about, how would you define it? Yes, you do have to be ready with a definition to suggest that there's a lot of theoretical thought behind your ism. Let's think. Collaborativism is the science, the art and science. Collaborativism is the art and science of working together for the sake of collaborating. Longer. As a function of collaborative activities and of the theory and practice for their use. Longer. In order to advise the future processes of collaboration in industry, institutions and society. It's important to get industry in there because that's where the consulting money lies. Brilliant. Collaborativism, everyone. Or at least educational or corporate collaborativism. Yeah, so you're obviously using the kind of creative process used in advertising, thinking of the angles and coming up with what they call sticky catchphrases. Except that in academia, it's also useful to have a few Latin or Greek elements in your isms to cover the fact that in English, what you're describing is totally ordinary. Like doctors do on prescriptions. Yes, that's one of mine. Educational prescriptivism. Has your approach to ismism changed over the years? It has. I found that with practice you can often anticipate academic trends and isms that will become successful. In the 50s, for example, educational evaluation was popular because many researchers had been training officers during the war. But by the 70s, academics had turned against that trend because they didn't like being evaluated. So non-evaluated performance became fashionable, but that didn't catch on because no one came up with an ism for it. Exactly. If I'd been an educational theorist at that time, as I am today, I'd have come up with a term to express the importance of acting impulsively without evaluating the consequences, like spontaneousm. Another one, 143. And in the last 10 years, I've been reading the journal indexes quite regularly and finding that I can anticipate when a fashion is going to swing in the opposite direction. Schumpeter did in noting that social trends occur in 18-year cycles. I discussed that with Scrumpet on a panel recently, and we agreed that we think along the same lines. Schumpeter's been dead for 60 years. Yeah. And if I come up with an ism completely opposite to one of my earlier isms, I make sure it comes across that I'm flexible and open to new ideas. Aren't you afraid that educators who read your new isms will be encouraged to abandon old isms and practices that still have value? No. How long do you think you can keep coming up with isms? Indefinitely, I hope. I've reached the point in my career when I'm starting to reinvent some of my earlier isms, and they're working well with a whole new generation of young clients. So I'm still getting keynotes, and I guess I'll keep going for a while. Well, all strength to you. I might say strengthism to your efforts. Remember, you heard it here first. Educational collaborativism. We've already talked to Jon about his knack for inventing isms, impressive but sometimes quite meaningless terms, usually invented by somebody else already. So let's now talk about mission statements. When was it you realised that institutional mission statements were going to become popular? It's about the same time as I realised about the value of isms. An ism always needs a vague rhetorical definition to make people think that a lot of theorising has gone into developing the ism. I realise that institutions need the same kind of language as a statement of what they do. So you provide institutions with statements that describe their mission and their vision for the future. Their mission, yes, because that doesn't imply that they've actually achieved any of their goals yet. Of course. But you should never refer to an institution's vision because that implies they've got a clear idea of where they're going. And how did you start on what has become a very lucrative international consultancy for you, developing mission statements? Well, first I thought up a few trial definitions of corporate and academic missions. Let me show you. Think of a commercial product. Auto parts. Well, a company selling auto parts needs to express its mission in a few pithy sentences like, our mission is to sell auto parts, serving a basic role in the functioning of automobiles and providing our customers with a quality product for the construction of autos. That covers some key concepts, doesn't it? Important service, quality. But notice how some of the words are ambiguous. For example, serving a basic role, that can also mean making really simple auto parts that don't fully work yet. And the statement is careful not to specify the exact type of quality provided, low quality or high quality. Interesting. And it's particularly crucial never to specify the objective of good quality. That safeguards you against being liable for damages when the company's product fails. So basic and quality, these are like trigger words, and you have to imply that quality is a key priority, especially for clients who don't have good quality. What you're giving them, you see, is a checklist of qualities and services that they're not yet providing, to imply that they're on their minds to add at some unspecified future date. And talking vaguely about these goals in a mission statement makes the reader think that they're providing them already. And is this the same when you create mission statements for academic institutions? Very much so. In fact, universities and colleges are the best clients of all because they know the value of vague, impressive-sounding terminology. Do you interview the staff of the universities about their goals and objectives? Well, I used to, but I soon found that they're all satisfied with the same general kind of catch-all wording. So now I just give them a set of mission statement templates to choose from. Like the old balladeers who went round selling their songs on broadsheets. That's good. In fact, this is the pouch that I carry around with me containing my mission statement templates on post-it notes. Can you give me some examples? Well, an increasingly popular category is what I call the W&F mission statement, warm and fuzzy. Yeah. Here's one. The institution seeks to embrace its student in a loving and productive relationship that will equip him or her for a productive and profitable career and for a lifetime of quality teaching and learning activities and interpersonal relationships. Beautiful. That ambiguous word quality again. Yes, but it's impossible to know. It's important to know your client. Sometimes you need to give the statement a harder edge, like embracing the learner while ensuring his or her control over learning and assessment, free from meddlesome interference by teachers. That goes over very well with student unions. And it would also be popular with the designers of those massive open online courses, MOOCs, that let the students grade each other's papers. Well, really, that's useful. How many mission statement templates have you developed now? Hundreds? No, about half a dozen. That's all you need, because you leave blanks in them for the client to fill in. So auto parts can be changed to restaurant services or learner constructed knowledge or whatever. And the rest of the statement can be the same old guff, whatever the client. Amazing. Truly a man with a mission statement. Earlier in the interview, Jon described to us some strategies used by academics, like inventing terms ending with ism and providing clients with vague mission statements. Yes, that's just two strategies for survival as an academic and as a consultant. And you give workshops on these methods, don't you? How did you get started on that? Well, I mentioned to you how I was influenced by a colleague who could discuss any academic topic without actually knowing anything about it. Yes, you said he could skim the index of a journal and then talk about the articles without ever reading them, like a psychic. But like a stage mentalist, he used good distraction techniques to make everyone believe he was knowledgeable when he wasn't. That's right. His first technique was what I call the read it for me strategy, RIFM. He would say to a colleague, have you read the new article by so-and-so? It's quite interesting. Read it and tell me what you think. So the colleague would read the article and then tell him it covered some issues and omitted others. And then the first guy would repeat those opinions to other people. Yes, he'd say, so-and-so's new article covers certain issues and omits others. That's the use of discussion survival strategy number 2, which I call the AMI approach, or all my idea. And these strategies always work without fail, especially when it comes to talking about your own work. Even colleagues who do actually read the literature never read each other's publications. So to describe your own work, all you need to say is, as I pointed out in my latest article, even if you've not written one. Exactly. That's the IP approach. Intellectual property? No, implying publication. You know, you're unusual. You ask what the acronyms mean. Most academics don't like to give away that they don't know what acronyms stand for. So you can just make up any old acronym as you go along and drop it into the academic conversation, just as you do with isms. The same as dropping the names of well-known academics into the conversation. I knew someone who had time to fill in before an interview once at the University of Toronto. So we knocked on Marshall McLuhan's office door, and McLuhan said, come in. Then he talked to him about his new hot and cool media ideas and made him late for the interview. Then my friend went into the interview room and he said, sorry I'm late, Marshall McLuhan kept me talking. I expect he got the job. He did. But one thing puzzles me. When you talk about implying that you've published when you haven't, how do you list your publications in your resume without lying? It's important to tell people about your articles rather than your publications. Yeah. But academics are still expected to publish, aren't they? Yes, but there are distraction techniques to cover that problem too. Have you heard the saying, those who can do, those who can't do, teach? Yes. Well, what do you think those who can't teach or publish do? I don't know. Administer. They concentrate on committee work. And believe me, the survival skills I've been talking about work very well indeed on committees, because everyone there's using these survival techniques by mutual consent. So then you complain in your annual performance self-assessment report that all the committee work is preventing you from publishing. Simple. And it's possible to maintain a long and successful academic career on the basis of these techniques alone. Well, I found that hard to believe. Academics are known to be highly intelligent and fast-thinking. How can you possibly keep a lack of academic ability from them over a whole career? Easy.
no one's paying attention to you because they're all concentrating on using the same tactics to you and everyone else. But I am partly simplifying things here. A mean-spirited chair or dean might challenge you. So, to guarantee academic survival, you also need to practice what I call the 2 C's. Confidence in what you're saying, even without competence. And you teach these academic survival rules as a consultant all over the world. Yes. Finally, a test. Give me an ism and a name dropping all in one sentence. Do you really want to reduce this interview to a level of absurdism rather than respecting educational realism as Skinner and Brunner personally taught me? He's done it again. That's 2 isms and 2 name droppings. Will there ever come a day when academics no longer want to learn these survival techniques? No, it'll go on forever. Well, thank you very much for letting us into your valuable secrets, some of them. So that's the conference schedule, and there's your meal tickets, and that's like an invite from my prof to a wine and cheese. Well, thanks for showing me around. This your first time here? No, I've been here many times, conferences, family holidays. Have you met the other keynote speakers yet? Yeah, I know most of them. There's just a young guy from London I've not met before. Jerry. He's doing fantastic things with, like, video special effects, inserting himself into TV images. Yes, I've done quite a bit of that. But Jerry inserts himself into pictures with himself. Yes, so do I. It's an interesting area. But Jerry uses a new technique called keying. Have you ever heard of keying? Yes, I've been using keying since the 70s. Wow, prehistory. Maybe so. I was looking at the effects of keyed inserts on credibility, according to Festinger's... Anyway, Jerry's found that you can affect your on-screen credibility by the kind of image you insert. You know, I've seen this before. People like Jerry not reading the literature and then reinventing old studies as though they were all his own idea. Well, the problem with the literature today is that it's out of date, and if you quote it, you look old-fashioned. How old is a publication when it starts to look old-fashioned? Anything before about 2007. Even that's on the edge. Have you read my studies about keying published since 2007? Where were they published? Journals, books. More prehistory. We're into like blogs these days. They're up to the minute. But do blogs give you the detail you need to be sure the studies are well conducted? Often the studies aren't conducted. What Jerry does is he thinks up an idea for an experiment and then he writes about it in his blog without actually conducting it. Well, he calls it armchair experimenting, like Stephen Hawking, he says. So he compares himself to Stephen Hawking. But you can't rely completely on armchair speculation. Even Stephen Hawking's had to modify some of his armchair conclusions. Well, Jerry's got a word for that. Rational empiricism. Immanuel Kant called it that in the 18th century, which is much earlier than 2007. I said rational empiricism dates back to Kant, but rational empiricism ends with ism, and ism terms never get out of date. Jerry explained that in his blog. Oh, I don't know. With all my old-fashioned ideas, I don't understand why your profs invited me here as a keynote speaker. To be honest, he says you represent the olden days and you're a warning to us. Of what? The old teacher-centred learning ways, like giving out facts and opinions, whereas the new ways is what I've been doing with you just now, where I tell you what works. So what do you and other students like you want in a keynote speaker? Evidence that he's adjusted to our learner-constructed ways. How can he show you that? Cracking jokes, showing photos of his grandchildren. In other words, validating your learner-centred approach by suggesting that teachers are just empty-headed and sappy. I've got to go. Let me know if you need any help, like setting up a blog or whatever.